Well, here we are. We are live. Welcome to Faith and Friends, the interviews where we talk about faith. And today I am so happy because I get to talk to Pastor Kelsey Beebe. I've known her for, I guess, about a year. I met her first at the ELCA Outreach Center in Kenosha. She just sat there in my Bible study and didn't say a word. I kept waiting for her to jump in and say, give some pastoral stuff. But no, she just sat there and I felt she was judging me, but I don't think she was.
I was observing. I was getting a feel because I hadn't done one yet, so I wanted to come and see how it was done. So I was learning.
There you go. Yeah, because when you do a Bible study there, you just never know exactly where it's going to go.
Right.
Yeah. You have a path in your head, but it rarely goes the path that you think it's going to go.
Very true. Yeah, in a good way. It's the Holy Spirit.
Well, exactly. That's what makes it so cool because, gets us out of our linear thought processes, because I'm going to hit this and this and this. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we're over here now. Right. So all good. Well, I'm really glad that you could spend a little time with us today here in Mount Pleasant Lutheran Church Faith Community. You talk about your faith story, something that, I don't think that we do enough of. So, but tell us just a little bit about you. Tell us about Pastor Kelsey.
Pastor Kelsey. So I grew up in the United Church of Christ, and we're sister churches, sister denominations. And I was born into it. My mom was a UCC pastor. She passed away when I was 4 years old. And the whole church rallied around my family in that loss. She had multiple sclerosis, so we knew it was coming. But it was a devastating loss, of course. And being only 4 years old and my brother was 7, and they just rallied around us. And I got to see really what it means when a church lives into the promises they make in a baptism. So we always say in a baptism, we're a community, we're making these promises to help raise this child in faith. And I got to see what it looked like when a church lived into those promises. And I had a special case in that when I was baptized, my parents had all past, present, and future members named my godparents. I don't know why they made that choice, but they did. And they lived into it. They helped raise us. The church ladies were our babysitters, and they encouraged us in our faith journey. My brother plays piano, and he to this day is a church pianist. And
really,
now I'm a pastor, and I think I was 13 when I first preached a sermon at that church. That's
13?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine preaching a sermon at 13.
Well,
it all would have been about what I watched on TV that week.
Well, I was 9. I was 9 when I first said I wanted to be a pastor.
Really?
I think for me it was, I was so young when my mom passed, and all I heard were stories from people about how she helped them and how she loved them and how she had changed their minds in good ways, opening their minds. And I think our church we became open and affirming in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And, she, I think, laid the groundwork for that. It was after she had passed, but, really built that foundation. And hearing so many stories about people saying, your mom made me feel like I was the only person in the room. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, I want to love people like that. I want to have that kind of impact. And so, that's how I ended up in ministry. And, the thing about faith though, is like I say, I was 9 when I first said I wanted to be a pastor, but that doesn't mean I wasn't thrown into the depths of the despair that we all experience in life and in grief. And, I had an experience in college that really, tossed me into a ditch, metaphorically speaking. And, for a while I was like, I don't know what I believe. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think doubt is a bad thing. I think that time in my life where I was really questioning and doubting made my faith stronger now.
Right.
But having that time of really wrestling with my faith and what do I believe allowed me to really determine what it is that I believe and know that questions are good. And I often say that I ran from God and then I crawled my way back.
Oh, that's a great metaphor. Well, I think that's a really good thing you brought up there, because I think that very often, we beat ourselves up because maybe we are questioning, but I think that faith unquestioned there's no depth there. There's no breadth there. That when you wrestle with some things, and then you come back crawling, or you come back, skipping. It's just it's different.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that that's something that a lot of times we roll over our head a lot. It's I'm questioning, but I should just go through this. You should question.
Absolutely. And I think faith without doubt isn't actually faith. When you don't have any doubt, you have certainty. And certainty is not the same thing as faith. Faith does, by definition, require you to not be able to see where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
It requires courage. And, I think that's an important thing for folks to remember, that you're not a bad person. You're not a bad Christian for having doubt or for having questions. You're human, and it's part of our faith story. I mean, Jacob wrestled with God and demanded a blessing
mm-hmm.
from it.
Yeah, that story always kind of like just floors me. Yeah, I wrestled with God. Exactly. It's just always, what did that look like? So
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. So you're pastor now of 2 different churches.
Yes.
Yeah, which just floors me that she's got 2, not 1, 2. So how has that been faith affirming for you? Like, working with, 2 different congregations. I mean, working with one congregation, but like 2 different, because I imagine each has their own personality.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's, I'm not a mom yet, but I imagine it's like having 2 children that are very different, right? Mm-hmm. Or I think of friends who are teachers who talk about, you get the siblings
mm-hmm.
in your classroom, and you can't expect one to be like the other. And so just in the same way, having 2 churches, they each have their own history, and they each have their own personality, and, each their own way of functioning and living out their mission and their ministry in the world. And I think it makes it more rich.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much from what each church does and what the people in the churches are passionate about. And
mm-hmm.
I think these 2 churches have the gift of a long history of being in ministry together. They've shared a pastor for 27 years,
wow.
28
and yet
years.
They're like, no, we're still going to maintain our place over here.
Yeah. But that's like, because they each...
like, we're going to date. We're dating, but we're not going to move in together.
Right. And some people shouldn't move in together, and so they both have such incredible strengths. And, one is here in Union Grove in town. And so ministry for them and the way they connect with their community looks different than Raymond Community Church, which is out on Highway G and, surrounded by, I think it's cornfields. And if you stand just right, and the wind blows just right, you smell the cows. And that's a whole new thing being from, urban Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really fun. And I had the blessing of being able to serve 2 churches when I lived in Missouri. So I kind of got a feel of how to do that, and, making sure I balance my time. And
mm-hmm.
I don't want one to feel like they're the special one and the other one not. And so
because you mentioned like kids, because no parent will really ever admit that they have favorites, but they do have favorites. Just saying.
Well, I try my hardest.
You don't say it, but you're secretly, you're like, I really like spending time with this kid so much more than the other one.
Well, I was given the advice when I first started doing this in Missouri, serving 2 churches at once, that it fluctuates.
Mm-hmm.
One church will be smooth sailing and things will be great, and that'll be your favorite for a while, and then it'll flip 6 months later. And so I try to just stay open to how the Spirit moves, and mm-hmm. know that there's always going to be difficult parts of the job, but there's so much grace and so much love, and mm-hmm. that's what makes it all worth it.
So thinking, 2 different churches, 2 different personalities, are some, like, from your perspective, some commonalities that, people have been struggling with, that, regardless, with, could be faith wise, or just, mm-hmm. Seeing God through, in life, in today's world, things that you've been seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, throughout the past year and a half, people have really struggled with, the why. And I think that's all the way back to the story of why the book of Job was written, is mm-hmm. to understand, why do bad things happen? And just trying to really wrap our minds around that. We've had a lot of conversation about that Last summer, 2020, I started doing, we call them porch visits. So I go and sit with folks on their porch or on their patio, and we talk. And we had a lot of conversations around racial justice.
Mm-hmm.
What does the phrase Black Lives Matter mean? Just folks trying to really get an understanding of what all this means for them and
Mm-hmm.
for our community. And, feeling of like, I don't feel super affected by this. Like, I don't live right in downtown Kenosha. So
Right.
can you help me learn? And I think there's a real thirst for learning and figuring out the why, and then figuring out what role do we play
Mm-hmm.
in all of this.
That's really interesting because, it is a different dynamic, like when you're out in an area where everybody looks like you, and, you're pretty insulated from things that, and I think when stuff last summer happened in Kenosha, it made things a lot more real, because before it's always over there. We're good here in Wisconsin. I always tell people Wisconsin's like the best place to live because we don't have hurricanes, we don't have a lot of tornadoes, we don't have
earthquakes.
I don't think the terrorists even know we exist, so yeah, we're like, pretty golden, for the most part. So, but last summer it made, so everything's always someplace else. But I think that that's really kind of, like I said, made people like, hey, what is this about? What do I need to know so I can, be a little bit better versed?
Well, and I think too, it says something about us as white folks that, it doesn't touch us.
Yeah.
That we weren't fully aware of it before last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were a lot of white folks last summer who were like hit in the face with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was hard. And I remember having some conversations with folks about, I was preaching about it a lot, and we're coming up on the 1 year mark of when Jacob Blake was shot. And I believe it's this week actually. Mm-hmm. And, people really trying to understand and grapple with what it means to take your like the horse's blinders off. What does that mean? What does that look like? And folks feeling like when you preach about it so much, like I feel like I can't escape it. And then saying, well, maybe there's an invitation there. Maybe there's a challenge there. And even as a pastor and in our faith, it's not just there to comfort us, right? Our faith isn't just there to wrap us in a cozy blanket and make us feel good. And there's benefit to that, but also
that's my favorite blanket.
Yeah, right, exactly. But faith is also there to push us and to challenge us and to help us see, who's being left out, who's being forgotten. I heard a woman say on a podcast this morning, Jesus walked around asking 2 questions. And those 2 questions were, who is religion leaving out and excluding, and who is power oppressing? Mm-hmm. And he goes and he collects all those people. And there's challenge in that, especially in, middle class, upper middle class, white communities. When we hear Jesus pressing those questions on us now in the 21st century, there's a rub there, but it's a good rub, and it can feel uncomfortable. But like I always say to my yoga students when I teach yoga, discomfort isn't a bad thing. Pain is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Discomfort is what helps us grow.
Yeah. I was when you were saying that, I was thinking, well, like, yeah, it's the pain is, the discomfort's where you grow, because you're moving to, from the comfortable to the, to something else. Yeah. I liked your blanket analogy. That was good. Yeah. Because I like I like comfort.
Yeah. Oh, we all do. I want to go to church, and I want to feel wrapped in God's grace.
Right.
But sometimes God's grace looks like a little shove,
right,
which is never easy. Never easy.
So, for the average person, that wants to know things, wants to, learn more or explore things faithfully, what are some things that they could do or, go out and learn? I'm looking for like resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Resources. I think it depends on each person, where they are in their journey and what exactly it is they're looking for and what their avenue of learning is. Mm. So for me, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I like to move, touch, explore. And so if you're like that, if you're a kinesthetic learner, learning through your body, I would recommend, take a movement class, take a yoga class where there's an element of spirituality. There's all sorts of different things you can learn and figure out how can prayer and how can movement be prayer? How do we pray with our bodies? For other folks, I think.
Well, before you go on, I was interested in that because, she would offer a
chair yoga.
Yeah, chair yoga. Bible study there at the outreach center, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "My chair yoga is just sitting in my chair for Bible study."
I love it. Well, I think that, there's so much tension we hold in our bodies, and just if someone says, soften your shoulders. Notice if your tongue is pressed on the roof of your mouth and let it relax down. We don't realize how much we're clenched all the time. And, I believe the Holy Spirit moves in and is like, calm down, bringing us back to that comfort thing. And, for other people, maybe it's listening to podcasts. I'm an auditory learner from, I can read a bunch, but it's not going to stick.
Right.
I have to hear it.
Amen. Preach, sister.
So I think there's some great podcasts out there.
Lady Preacher. I heard that one's really good.
Yeah, you can listen to my podcast, Lady Preacher. I've interviewed Pastor Krista on that podcast last year, spring of 2020. And, podcasts are a great place to start. There's one called Cafeteria Christian, The Bible for Normal People, For the Love with Jen Hatmaker. I mean, there's a ton. There's
Bible for normal people.
Yeah, right.
Is normal in quotations?
I think so. Yeah. There's so many resources out there in terms of podcasts. If you're a learner in terms of reading, there's so many books. I highly recommend anything by Rachel Held Evans. She passed away about 2 years ago now, but anything by her. She's great. Sarah Bessey wrote the book Jesus Feminist. She just had a book come out recently called Rhythm of Prayer, and it's just a collection of prayers written by women, and it's just it's phenomenal. I think there's so many resources, and then of course the Bible. And what I always recommend to people, no matter what age they are, I tell this to my confirmation students, and I tell this to my adults in adult Bible studies: just flip it open.
Yeah.
Just flip it to a random page. Read a few verses. If nothing sticks out to you, flip to another page. And I think I'll say 8 out of 10 times, there'll be something there for God to speak to you.
Right.
Just today we had Bible study at the Outreach Center this morning, and we were reading Proverbs 4 verse 23, which is, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And we discussed that for a while, and we still had more time. And, like you were saying earlier, Holy Spirit is sometimes, where is it going to take you? And I said, well, let's look at the rest of this page. Proverbs is really a book of teachings and advice and wisdom. So what else do you see? And so we just looked at this page in front of us and pulled out a few different verses that people are like, oh, this is really interesting what this says.
Yeah, it's amazing how powerful that can be. I know, when I went through Officer Candidate School in the Navy, that's what I do first thing in the morning. I would just open up right there, and that's what I would think about all day when I was getting cycled by the Marine drill instructor. Cycles when it's a nice way of saying physically beating the hell out of you. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you needed something.
But it was one of those things that, and there would be things like, so, it just gave me something to mentally, and spiritually chaw on during the course of the day that, and it was very powerful for me,
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And, another practice I think is great is I started doing this when I was 12 or 13, but I kept a prayer journal and I would just write letters to God. And some of those letters were, dear God, this sucks. Like, I'm so angry at so-and-so, it was almost like a diary, but I was writing to God. And that has been a really grounding practice for me. And to look back and see how God answered those prayers in a variety of ways is really powerful. So I often recommend that to folks who like to write, is maybe your resource, your practice is just maybe write a few words to God.
I think, like with anything, I think the key is to pick something that is, faith forming for you.
Yes.
That, you know, like I couldn't journal. I'm not disciplined enough for it. I would actually feel guilty because I would buy a journal and then with every intention of doing it. But then 6 months down the road, I was like, man, I did that for 2 days. I feel so bad that I didn't keep doing it. So, I mean, that would, you know, but, you know, some other things, you know, I would do as far as like, you know, just picking a verse out, you know, that would work for me. So I think it's, you know, just figuring out, knowing you and like what you're actually going to do, but do something.
Yeah. It's kind of, I like to shop. So I think of it as shopping. You go to the store, you know, grab a few different things, try it on, see what works.
Right.
And, you know, maybe it'll work for a season and then you have to shift to something else.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it was bad. You know, I've got dresses I wore that were cute 10 years ago that are not cute now. Doesn't mean they were bad then. So I think, you know, I love what you said about finding what works for you. And then don't be afraid to let it change and evolve over time.
Right.
And it can be as simple as lighting a candle. That is a faith practice. Lighting a candle.
Yeah, that's something I never really thought about. Like, there's so many different things that can connect us to God's creation. That, you know, sometimes in the busyness of life, we just don't pay attention to what's going on. But just, you know, taking a moment to be in the moment and look around and see, hey, what is God doing? You know, what's happening here? You know, can do everything and just kind of like, you know, shifting your perspective for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to drive my dad mad because I would get up in the morning, I'd get in the shower, and then afterwards I'd sit down on my bedroom floor and do nothing. And he'd come in and like, what are you, like, come on, get ready for school. But there was something about just sitting for a moment that allowed me in that chaotic time to like, and center, you know? And so I love that practice. And I think it's like you said, it's what works for you. Maybe it's going for a drive. Maybe it's watching the thunderstorm, you know, maybe it's push-ups. I don't know. God bless you if that's you. So yeah, I think it's different for everyone. It's about the intention.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I realize a lot of people will watch this on the backside because it's in the middle of the day, but I really appreciate you spending a little time with me today, you know, sharing a little bit about your journey and, you know, the things that you've done, and that, you know, even for you, like, you grew up in the church, but you had some times where you struggled as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important thing for people to realize, that, you know, we all struggle. We all have to question and wrestle sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that's why we call it faith practice. It's not perfect. It's not faith perfect. It's practice.
Faith perfect. That'd be a great podcast name. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you a little bit later.
Thank you.